Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Promptly Speaking, where we bring you the stories of the movers and shakers of industry and their journey to success. I'm your host, Jack Madrid, and today we have a special guest, Nathalie Nahai, author and web psychologist. She was also a keynote speaker at the International IBPAP Summit last October. Let's welcome Nathalie to the show. Let's welcome Nathalie to the show. Nathalie, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us today at Promptly Speaking.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You were one of the most popular of the keynote speakers at yesterday's International IBPAP Summit. And I guess I'd like to ask, you've been in the Philippines a few days now. It's your first trip. What is your first impression of the country and Filipinos?
First impression of the country, warm, humid, and lots of beautiful trees. First impression of Filipinos, very warm, very joyful, and quite playful. We had such a good dance last night. It was just, those are my impressions.
Yeah, we Filipinos like to party.
Yeah, I can tell. It's great.
We now know you a little bit, but certainly, you are a well-known author and psychologist. But let's take a step back and go earlier in your life. When you were growing up, can you share with us some of the key influences and that help shape your interest in human behavior and the arts?
Sure. So we'll go with the arts first because that's easier. So I always drew from a very, very young age. My mum took me and my brother, who's a couple of years younger than me, to art classes on Sundays. So we would learn how to paint in oils. So that was always a big passion. And that was my first big love. Music came second. And then psychology came third when I was at A-level, so age 16. And I'd started with, it was English literature, art, physics and social biology. And I started sociobiology. And after about 10 days, I had so many notes, a wodge of notes so thick that I thought, I can't handle this. So then someone suggested, well, why don't you try psychology? And I never had come across it before. And I switched. And we had the most extraordinary teacher called Annette Vagette. And she would apply the principles of psychology in the classroom. So, for example, we know that people's concentration tends to drop after about 45 minutes, give or take. And so if we had like a double period of an hour and a half, when it got to the half time of 45 minutes, she'd get us to stand up and we'd kind of do a bit of exercise, whatever. And so she ignited in me this passion and curiosity in human behavior, decision-making, psychology, hidden dynamics that shape how we relate to each other. And it was because of her that I then went on to study psychology at university.
And now you talk about things like humanity in the age of AI, but that's fascinating how you got started on your career. We're going to talk about AI in later on in the podcast, but from our conversation so far, I know you've lived and worked in many different cultural and professional environments. How have this array of experiences shaped your worldview, both personally and professionally?
Well, my background is quite mixed. So I'm born in London, born in the UK. But as you said, I've traveled quite a bit. And my mum was born in Iran, in Tehran. Her father was Iranian. Her mother was half French, half Belgian. My father's side is from Gibraltar, but his mother was raised in Tangier. So she spoke many languages, including Arabic, French, Spanish, English. And then he was raised in Gibraltar, but we have Mediterranean roots. So from Catalonia, from Belgium, from Scotland, from Genoa in Italy. So I've always been very interested in plurality. And in the hidden layers that even people who've had like 6 generations back in one place, there are always hidden layers to people. And we all hold worlds within us. And so one of the things that I love about coming to new places and meeting new people is discovery about what else exists. And there's kind of the diversity element of just new experiences. And then also that universal quality of our desire for love and to belong and to feel connected. And I just find that kind of interplay of those familiar and novel things really compelling and joyful.
So that very multicultural and racial
I suppose so, yeah.
blend has really shaped. It seems like each of them help shape who you are today.
Yeah. And it's a family with different religious backgrounds, musical backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, food, languages. A window into the world.
Wow. So, author, psychologist, artist. What would a typical day look like for you when you're not, speaking at events?
So depending on the day, but my most desirable typical day would be, and this is not every day, would be if I get up at 7, which doesn't happen all the time, and then I have an hour to myself, and then from 8 till 9:30, I paint or I have some time to do something creative. And then I have emails, I have a podcast. I've been running my own podcast for the last 6 years. And prior to that, I was co-host of The Guardian Tech Weekly. So I'm very interested in people's perspectives on technology and relationships with one another and with the living world. And so sometimes it will be in preparation for those interviews. I'll be preparing slide decks, reading research on AI, human behavior. I also love, as you know, to eat. So I'll probably be planning what I'm going to eat for lunchtime and what I'm going to eat for dinner. I'm not a great cook, but feed me and I'm happy. So it's a mix of things. And then I most recently spent quite a lot of time in the recording studio, recording a folk album, which is my third. So depending on where I am in the year, I could be flinging myself deep into any sort of project. So that's kind of, it depends on the week and the month.
Wow. That's a very full day, sounds like. So how do you actually unwind and stay as grounded as you are?
Food. I unwind with food. I also unwind. So my partner's from Costa Rica. We met in Barcelona, which is where we both live. And we send each other, he does it throughout the day. I do it at the end of the day. Just funny things on Instagram. I know it sounds really, probably a bit ridiculous. But then at the end of the day, we'll have a glass of wine and we'll go through what we've sent each other. I send him lots of animals. He sends me lots of videos of people hurting themselves, different kind of sense of humor. And then we might watch a show together or we'll go out and meet with friends. That's my favorite thing, is when we go out and, be with other people that you love, and it's just joyful. Yeah.
Well, that sounds pretty good to me.
You should come to Barcelona,
especially in a city like Barcelona.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your presentation, which was so well received at the ITBPM Summit. Some of our audience members were not there. So can I just ask you to maybe summarize it really, really
succinctly?
Succinctly. What were your 2 or 3 main takeaways that you wanted to impart to the audience?
So the first thing is that when it comes to AI and any emerging technology, we have to learn how to discern and critically assess reality into fact and fiction. And this is an ever-moving thing, right? So whatever the headlines are, to look beyond the hype and say, okay, what are investors doing? Where's the money going? What's happening in terms of resource use, supply chains, human behavior, legislation? Are we really all going to lose our jobs and end up in a very transformed reality within the next 6 months? And the answer is, of course, no. But then the question is, okay, once you've got some of these key pieces in place and you see what's happening in terms of regulation around AI in the US, or issues around cognitive liberty or AI and robotics, or its impact on societies, then you can start to make better decisions within business, for yourself, for education. So it's really that. It's separating fact from fiction, getting greater agency, and deciding what kind of world you want to live in, and using that as your starting point from which to ask, how do we use technology to get towards a world in which we're flourishing?
Now, one of the most frequently asked questions, I mean, not just at the conference, but throughout the whole year, and in fact, most of last year too, was really the effect of AI on jobs in general, and in our industry, the IT BPM industry. It seems to get the most focus on the impact of AI. So can you comment on that?
Well, I think a lot of people are very afraid of losing their jobs. Last year in 2023, Goldman Sachs issued an announcement that 300 million jobs would be lost or degraded through the use of AI. And this is sort of peak concern, peak hype, I think, when ChatGPT came out, and people were very excited about its capabilities and fearful, understandably. And now, as we've had more of the more recent models come out, and there's still really significant issues with fabrication of facts, so hallucinations, and we're seeing issues around return on investment. Investors are concerned about the revenue that's being generated, and there's not as much value that had been predicted. I think one of the key things is that we're seeing that any kind of job loss is going to happen more slowly than people had feared in most sectors. AI is being used to augment people's roles. We saw yesterday at the event the Sanas app, which translates people's or kind of changes in real time people's voices. So the accent is Americanized in that particular example. It doesn't address the underlying bias, which I think is important, but it does help solve for people's everyday concerns. So I think we are going to have to adapt. We have to be critical and think strategically about how we use technology, but it's not happening overnight. And I think also it's up to business leaders like yourself to create industry standards and to make sure that people aren't just taking the most recent technology and using it without thinking of the long-term consequences. So in this FT piece that then came out a few weeks ago, they were looking at the use of AI, generative AI in the legal industry, and how people had said higher up, well, actually, we're taking this much more slowly because we see that if our young associates coming in outsource everything to AI, they're not going to learn how to do all of the kind of work they need to do, the skills they need to have to be good lawyers. So we are seeing people think sensibly about how to use these technologies. And that's what we need, to just slow down, pause. Where can we use it? Where don't we want to use it? What businesses and societies do we want? So I would say don't panic as much. Let's have a sober conversation about how to use AI well.
Don't panic. Focus on things you can control.
Yeah.
Which is taking responsibility for your learning journey.
Definitely that as well.
And to our young listeners, well, not just to the young listeners, for all of us, what would you recommend, given our limited time, on the skilling front? What skills should we build on and strengthen, in this age of AI?
Yeah. So we need to be more adaptive. So you're talking about sort of the continuous learning journey. It's that openness to learning as we go on. I think resilience is a really important quality. I know it sounds like something which is hard to pinpoint, but things like trying something new every week, if you're in a business and you've got young people coming in and older people, whoever you might be, and you're struggling, thinking, I've never used AI before, where do I start? A great practical intervention can be to have one afternoon a week where everyone plays with a particular kind of platform. That's upskilling. That's resilience building. It's being in contact with the technology, testing it. What can it do? What can't it do? What do we do if we want to increase the output's quality? What kind of prompts do we use? And so starting to interact with the technology, support one another to do it so that we're feeling open to learning new stuff and testing. And I think that's one of the core skills, and the interpersonal relationships and the soft skills that we build because of that, to be able to adapt as things change in real time. Yeah. That's
a very powerful message right there. You said, try something for the first time, learn a new skill for the first time. That's already upskilling.
Yes.
You've taken the first step.
That's it.
That's quite insightful. So thank you for sharing that. Now, switching gears a little bit, knowing that, a topic that's so important to you is really reclaiming humanity. So on that front, what are some of the personal values, Nathalie, do you hold most dear, and how have they influenced both your written work and some of your life's decisions?
Quality of attention that we pay each other, I think, is really important. I think most of us long to be heard and seen. And I think learning to listen well and attentively is really important. And you know this as a podcaster, you really zone in. I can feel the quality of your attention. And it means that then whoever you are attending to, if it's done in an appropriate way, can feel like they can open up. And if we can open up, we can create deeper, more meaningful, richer relationships. And that's where we get the chance to feel more empathy, more compassion. I'm interested in finding points of similarity between people and making sure that everyone feels that they have a space to speak. So often it's kind of the loudest or the most I'm quite extroverted, the most extroverted in a room that might be able to be heard. And often the most insightful questions, challenges, ideas. We were talking earlier about resilience and adaptation. Often that comes from some of the quietest people in the room. So there's something about quality of attention and listening that I think is really important. I like people to feel safe and comfortable around me so that they feel able to just be themselves and shine. Creativity and beauty are really important values to me. You mentioned earlier about the music and the arts. For me, there's something that is so life-giving, especially when there's a lot of fear and unpredictability and precarity. There's something so life-giving and hope-bringing about orienting towards beauty. And that could be anything. It doesn't have to be painting or music. It could be sitting for a beautiful meal together or going for a walk, looking at a tree. It's also learning ways of paying attention. I think that's kind of one of the key themes. And an openness to being challenged in a kind but robust way. There's sort of, if we're going to develop ideas together, it's helpful to have a context in which people feel that they can speak up and that we can strengthen that muscle of being challenged, not in a defensive kind of point, because that's not going to help anyone, but in a kind of, I disagree with you there. I want to learn more. Tell me what's your thinking, leaning towards one another.
Two very important lessons there that are certainly well worth remembering. Quality of attention. I really like that. One of the rules of civility that I've tried to share with my sons is really paying attention. And in these days of distraction and noise and social media and whatnot, that has become a lot more challenging than it should be.
Yeah, for sure.
That this quality of attention. So that's very powerful. And I really also like what you said about the ability to listen. Wow. What were you've written extensively about navigating uncertainty and fostering resilience. You talked about that. How do you personally cope with uncertainty in some of these difficult moments of your life?
I eat chocolate.
Well, that certainly helps.
Dealing with uncertainty. I think there's several answers. I mean, it's a very glib answer to give. I think one, there's kind of knowing what you need in the moment when you're in a hyper-stressed state, when there's a sort of uncertainty that hits you sideways. And so things like sleep. I know it sounds really boring and it's not sexy, but sleep is really important. I need touch. So asking my partner, can you just give me a hug? And it reduces my stress levels. So it's kind of that sort of regulation that you can have with another body, because we're animals at the end of the day. So that's another one. In terms of longer term, I think and I struggle with this because my life I'm a bit like an octopus. I've got all these different projects going on at any one time, and it can be quite... Did
you say octopus?
Yeah. Yeah, my partner Freddie, he always talks about sort of monkeys and octopuses, and monkeys have maybe one or two tasks and projects, and octopuses have like independently autonomous, agentic, intelligent limbs, and I'm more like that. But it means that I'm about trying to live 5 different lives in one. And so for that, it can help to have some kind of structure. And one of the structures that I had for a long time, we moved house in February, but one of the structures I had was that every full moon, because it's a nice way to stay connected with a natural rhythm in a city, we would open our art studio, because I'm a painter and my partner's a painter, and have music nights. And then people would come, they know exactly where it is. You see when the moon is full, and you would come, bring wine, cheese, whatever you want, sit on the floor, very informal. And we'd be there for 3-4 hours, singing songs, doing, it could be like folk music, it could be a Bob Dylan song or whatever. And that to me is really important. It's that time away from technology, being together, focusing on sound and beauty and eating and just joy. That's really important. That de-stresses me.
Wow.
Yeah.
In your keynote yesterday, one of my own takeaways was what you said about the importance of the spark of creativity. So, what role does creativity play, in your life outside work? Are there artistic hobbies or practices that that bring you, this inspiration?
Yeah. So, I've always had a love of painting from a very young age. My first love was painting and drawing. And when I moved to Barcelona, it was to take a sabbatical after I'd done the second edition of my first book. And I ended up going for 3 months and staying on for 3.5 years, completed this realist painting course. And I've stayed in Barcelona since then. So in January, it'll be 8 years. And this year I had one of my paintings called Light in the Well of Shadows, selected for the competition of the Royal Society of Portrait Painters in London, which is one of the most prestigious portrait competitions. And it sold. And so creativity really channels through my painting, through my music, dancing. We had a proper wiggle at IIS, and gathering with people. I also run salons, the Flourishing Futures Salon, and that's a creative act. It's a creative act of bringing people together and facilitating conversations around what it means to flourish in times of turbulence. So, there's lots of ways to be creative.
Wow, you are a creative octopus.
Oh, I like that.
We're gonna switch gears now, Nathalie, and I'm gonna ask you to do something.
Okay.
I'm gonna ask you a series of questions, and I don't want you to think too hard about them. Just say the first thing that comes into your mind.
Oh no.
Okay.
Be warned.
Ready?
Okay.
Morning person or night owl?
Night owl.
What is your favorite Bob Dylan song?
Times They Are Changing.
Okay. They are changing. What is your guilty pleasure?
Oh, eating naughty things at night when I shouldn't, like ice cream out of the freezer.
Eating naughty things.
Yeah.
What's your favorite movie? And what scene gets you the most?
So the movie that first comes to my mind, but I've only watched it once, but it was really powerful, was Pan's Labyrinth. And there's a scene where the unseeing being goes like this, and he has the eyes in his palms, and it was just, I think because it's very Jungian, and it speaks to me, that kind of metaphor.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Carl
terrifying.
Jungian.
Carl Jungian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite painter?
Oh no, I can't answer this one.
The first thing that pops into your mind.
I really like Lord Leighton, Alma Tadema, like the pre-Raphaelite bunch. The late 1800s, 1880s, 1890s.
Okay. One word to describe you.
Complex.
What would your friends say?
Cheeky.
Cheeky, okay. What is the one Filipino word you've learned in the past 48 hours?
There's the double one. What was it? Hola hola.
Halo halo.
Halo halo. See, I didn't get it right. No. That amazing dessert that you mushed together.
Yes.
Halo halo. Hola hola. Halo halo.
Halo halo. Yes. Okay.
Oh dear, that was embarrassing.
What makes you smile?
Silly things like
good.
Silly
you have
things.
A good sense of humor.
Thanks, you too.
What's the one thing you learned that was new today?
That you can put red beans in a dessert and it really works when you mush it all together.
It was a memorable halo halo.
It was.
You had there. How would you like to be remembered, Nathalie?
As creative and kind. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I know that was not so easy, but that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
In your journey of advocating for ethical business practices, what personal sacrifices or challenges have you faced, and how did you try to overcome them?
I don't know how to answer that question. It's tricky. I think one of the things I feel guilty around, I think guilt is often a good barometer of challenge or struggle, is actually flying, which I've encountered with a lot of other people who speak for a living. And it's because obviously there's a carbon footprint attached, and it's actually not one of the worst things you can do in terms of damage to the living world. But that's something that I feel conflicted about. And then I do these convoluted maths in my head, which also is not that healthy, but it's kind of like, well, but I don't drive a car. I don't own a car. I'm lucky enough to live in a city where you can walk and take a bike. I don't have kids. That's another carbon footprint. But then it's like, well, should one not have kids? Because, you know, then you get into silly, sort of slightly silly territory. But that's something that that I still feel I would, if there was a way to fly that wasn't damaging to the world, I would hop on it like that. Yeah.
Understood. Staying on the theme, is there a particular book or experience or a single piece of advice that has had this kind of lasting impact on you personally?
The first book that comes to mind is Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a very beautiful, well-known book by Robin Wall-Kimmerer. And it's about seeing with two eyes in the sense of scientific, Western, materialistic perspective alongside indigenous scientific wisdom practices. And it's a beautifully written book. It's poetic, it's insightful, and it's a very powerful read. I recommend it to everybody. And the other book, which is my favorite book of all time, is Philip Pullman's Dark Materials. And it's about this young girl called Lyra who lives in a universe not dissimilar to our own. And it's kind of this magical world in which some of the myths that we live with, like witches and souls, like the daemon of, I think it was ancient Greek, the idea that we each have like a soul, but then in this book, it can take a physical form and it's an animal and it settles into one specific form when you reach adolescence. And it's just an incredible world. And it speaks to ideas around philosophy, agency. It's extraordinary. It's supposed to be for children, but I absolutely love it.
Sounds like that might go a little bit above my head.
No, you have to read it.
But
read it.
Yeah, I trust you. I trust you.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up, this session, it's been a fascinating conversation. But I guess I have one more question. If you were not doing the work that you do now, what other passion or career do you think you would have pursued?
I think if it wasn't this, and I had my time again, I might do something like ethnobotany or what else? I might have painted earlier, but I like having a mix of things. But ethnobotany is interesting. A mix of people, plants, that sort of world would be very interesting to me. Or a zoologist. I love animals. Yeah.
That's so you, I think.
Thanks.
Now, we have these listeners, who probably still want to talk about or hear from you some career advice.
Yeah.
You've been in the Philippines for a few days now. You've gotten a feel for who we are, what our culture is. What advice would you give, young Filipinos now as they begin to make these career decisions, knowing what you do? You've traveled the world. You've seen, you understand the potential effects of AI and the future of work. These are the things that are in the minds of many of us here.
Yeah.
What pieces of advice would you give them?
Well, bearing on something that you said to me earlier in our stay, that this is one of the youngest countries, and I think the average age is around 25 or so.
Yes.
You're saying, which is extraordinary because I think developmentally speaking, when we're younger, we tend to be more adaptable and open to newness and to changing. And so for people listening to this now, don't buy into the fear and the hype around AI. Stay open, learn about the sciences, learn about the psychology side of things, about cultural context, lean into learning about geopolitics, like what's going on politically in the world. Start being curious about these things, play with these technologies and approach it not from a perspective of, oh my goodness, I have to learn this now because otherwise I'll be left behind, which is our natural tendency for many people, but more from a perspective of, okay, we're at a critical point in humanity's experience as a species. How can I play a part in engaging with this moment and driving it towards something that I would be proud to leave the people who come after me? And it starts with play and curiosity. And one of the things I'm most moved by coming here is the sense of community there is and the warmth and the belonging. Like I've been welcomed in such beautiful ways by so many people that I would now like to call friends. And that is a valuable, vast strength. So using that connectivity, that community, that desire to belong and to be with one another, and then bringing that curiosity to the platforms, the new technology, and talking about it, learning about it together. That's what I would say.
We do have that, Nathalie.
Yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you for confirming that sense of community. That's something that our ITBPM community or ecosystem has that is unique.
Yeah.
So those are 3 powerful C's that I just heard. Creativity.
Yes, for sure.
Community and compassion.
Yeah. And curiosity. Let's
and
give it a 4th.
it begins with curiosity.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
You could write a book on
Curiosity,
this.
creativity, compassion, and then that sense of community.
Yes.
Very powerful messages indeed. Nathalie, it was such a pleasure to have you on Promptly Speaking. Thank you for taking the time. So that was such a fun conversation.
Thank you for your amazing questions. That was great.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Nathalie, and what an enjoyable episode that was. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Promptly Speaking. I hope you enjoyed our episode today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.
That's information technology and business process management. We are coders and programmers, agile animators, illustrators, auditors, analysts, from consultants to managers, searching nurses and doctors, data developers and testers, VA smiling CXRs and artificial intelligence engineers. Oh wait, there's more. We are problem solvers and number crunchers. We speak in several languages, including Java, Python, Python, and so on. And on and on and on. We create heroes and villains. We gain experience and level up in life.
We are the ITBPM industry, working with the Philippines. Join us.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and subscribe to IBPAP on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram. Stay tuned for the next episode on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.
IBPAP.